got one person listed as Huawei Nova. If you can go ahead and mute your mic. Okay. So one thing I just wanted to start off by saying was an apology for last time and the technical issues we faced on the call. But then also a huge thank you for everybody here for coming back. I can see we've got another 17 people in here tonight. We may have a few more coming in as we go forward. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, a huge thank you to Isabel for helping us arrange this again. And yeah, looking forward to sharing on maximizing engagement in virtual presentations. So with the rise of the coronavirus this year, I think one thing that we perhaps wouldn't have expected is that we've all overnight become virtual presenters. So many of us are on calls like this one, presenting to our colleagues, to our clients, to our customers. Maybe we're just on calls with friends and family. And overall, we've witnessed, I want to say, quite a lot of bad habits on these calls, a lot of things that haven't exactly gone to plan. This call from Thursday night is testament to that. Not everything went exactly to plan, and we were not able to finish on Thursday. So we're all human, and it does happen to all of us, unfortunately. And communicating virtually is difficult. We've got a couple of people coming in, Vivi and someone listed as Huawei Nova. If you can go ahead and mute your mics. Or Isabel, I think you're the host. If you can mute all, that would be great. Okay. So tonight we're going to be addressing the issue from three different aspects, looking at focusing on the audience before we focus on ourselves, checking our tech, looking at ways we can set up when we're at home or in a kind of makeshift office environment, and what best practices there to get the best out of our tech, and how to perform in an online setting and what that means versus face-to-face. What you're going to take away from tonight are some practical changes that you can implement to your online presentations straight away, as well as just sharing back and forth on best practices and things that you have done or have seen done that you think are particularly effective. We have so much wealth of know-how in this room, lots of experience, and I know all of our cumulative experience together is going to be far greater than just me sharing my own opinions and experiences. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what all of you have to share as well. In addition, hopefully by the end, you'll get to know each other a bit better, network a little bit at the end. You'll have an opportunity to share some of your contact details if you so wish at the end of the call in the chat box. So before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about me. Who am I? Why am I the one talking currently? My name's Dan Withers. I'm the founder of Engage, and I'm a presentations coach. I've been working here in China for 9 and a bit years, working with Fortune 500 companies like Universal and Hayworth, helping them create better presentations all around, looking at things like corporate storytelling, pitching, persuasion in business, all of these types of topics. As well as some innovative startups. And I love working with the startup community on the ground in Shanghai, where Teranga Valley is a fantastic example of a community doing it the right way with their startup founders and helping support everyone become better. And in addition, some universities here in Shanghai as well, including Shanghai Tech University, where I worked for a number of years, spearheading their public speaking program and their English language program as well. And I believe we have a couple of former students of mine from Shanghai Tech on the call tonight, which is really cool. Good to see you again, guys. If you want to connect with me, please do so on one of these two platforms, WeChat on the left, LinkedIn on the right. I'm always happy to accept and add, and I love chatting anything presentations. So please do get in contact, refer me to your companies. Though this may be free, I'd love to make some money anytime soon. Business is slow for all of us, and yeah, for the coaches as well, of whom I can see a number in the room, Colin, Maria. Yeah, it's some tough times for all of us. So if your company does have budget and do have training needs, by all means, reach out and get in contact. So let's hear from you. This is a question we shared last time, but we have a number of different people on the call now. And I want to know, what challenges do you face when you're giving virtual presentations? I'd like you to go ahead and stick your answers into the chat box. And then as the answers come through, I may call on a couple of you to elaborate just a little bit on your answers. So go ahead, what challenges do you face? please put those answers into the chat. Interesting. Following body language. Nice. Anne, let's start with you then. Following body language, what do you mean there?
Because I do coaching, a lot of the coaching is around following body language and reading what people are through how they move as well. So it's a little bit more difficult to pick up things because you're virtual rather than in the room. So intuition and that kind of disappears a little bit. And I know coaches are saying, no, it's not different, but it is. I've been working long enough.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're missing a lot of body language as well. With only a frame this big, there's so much of our bodies that goes missing off to the sides, or just our hands are in our laps and we just don't read them in the same way. And we'll touch a little bit on that later on. Very nice.
Yeah. And also if there's a group, that you've got so many on the screen.
Yes. Yeah, certainly. Concentrating on more than like the front row, as it were, virtually. Yeah. William, you say you're a novice. What aspect is it that you struggle with maybe when you're participating? Is there something that you struggle when you're in the audience?
Well, actually, I've never done a virtual presentation, so I'm at the beginning. This is actually my second visual presentation meeting, I guess. Okay. If that's the right language to use, this is actually my second one. So I'm at the beginning. I'm learning.
Okay. Cool. Well, I hope there'll be stuff. That's great. Oh, well, I hope there will be some different things from different people sharing tonight. Some things that people will share that will be useful for all different levels of experience. And I really hope that you're able to take some valuable stuff away this evening. Maria, you mentioned engagement and lively participation. Yeah, how lively does it get on your video calls, for example?
Not as much as live presentations, of course. What I actually struggle with these days is most of the content can, like, face-to-face workshops can be like longer, right? You can do a 2 hours and a half in-person workshop, but like realistically an online workshop of 2 hours and a half gets really, really difficult to keep the attention. And so I struggle with like delivering enough content and leaving enough time for people to engage like we're doing now. So I would love to do like what we're doing now and like call on people, but then I have to struggle with, you know, leaving enough time for actually deliver the content that needs to be delivered and without making it 3 hours.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Providing value as the person who's there to speak, but also making sure that everyone gets to engage with what you're saying. That's always a tough balance to strike. Wendy, I love your point here about getting responses from listeners. Yeah, sometimes you get zero feedback, and we're going to talk about, you know, is it better to be able to see the entire audience, or is it better to see no one and just concentrate on the camera? And I'd be really interested to hear some of your experiences as we go forward as well. So onto the topics that we're going to be covering in this session. We're going to be looking at focusing on the audience, checking our tech, working the camera, and what performance skills mean in an online setting. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. If anyone wants to throw any questions either my way or to any of the other participants, I'm sure we can get some good conversation going. And I might give you kind of a reflection task to take into your weeks this week as it relates to presenting in an online setting. So this is where we're going to be starting with focusing on the audience. And then a little bit later, we'll be diving into the second and third, tech and performance. So I shared this story last time, but I think it bears repeating for the people that have come in new, fresh this time. Have you ever been to a party and you get stuck chatting to someone that you really don't want to be talking to? You know, the person that's so self-obsessed, the person that just constantly talks about themselves. I know this person, this is what my job's about, me, my, I, yes, me. That's infuriating for a couple of reasons, but I think probably the main one is the fact that we're not engaged. We're not asked to contribute. We're not given questions our way. And so we feel it's entirely one-sided. Now, this is also true for any presenter-audience relationship. When you're the one on stage or you're the one behind a camera giving a presentation, you're not actually the star of the show. And it's very easy to get into the mindset that because I'm the one speaking, I'm the one that deserves everyone's attention and everyone else is here captive just listening to me. That's not the case. People want to be engaged. And ultimately, if it's a presentation, it should be persuasive in some way. I should be taking the audience from point A to point B, and I'm the one moving them. That doesn't make me the hero. That makes me the mentor. So I am not Luke Skywalker. I am Yoda. When you are presenting, you are not the hero. You are the mentor. So think of yourself in that way, that when you're on stage, when you're presenting, you are Yoda. You're moving them along on their journey. So here's a question I want to pose to you. What is one practice you've either used to keep people engaged when you're speaking virtually, or what is something that you've seen done to really good effect? Again, maybe let's hear this time, have 20 seconds of blissful silence, awkward silence if you prefer. And after that, I'm going to call on people by name. So please be ready. Okay. For the moment, if you can go ahead and put your mics on mute, especially if you've just joined. And let's start by throwing it out to the whole audience. Does anyone have one particular practice they'd like to share? Go ahead and say your name first, and then you can go ahead and share.
Colin Thompson.
Colin, please go ahead and share.
Yeah, Dan, so quite frankly, I use the exact same technique you just used. I like to pose questions out to the audience, and I tell them ahead of time, look, I'm going to call on you guys throughout this time, so be ready for me to sort of put you on the spot. So pretty much the same technique you use.
Cool. And how's that working for you?
Oh, they love it.
Okay.
It works good. It tends to work good. Yeah.
Great. Is this with clients? Is this with, what's the setting?
Well, not with clients. Not when you're doing coaching, there would be the environment for that. But anytime I'm doing a webinar or anything where I have guests who have turned in to listen to learn, I always use this engagement because, as you said, it's hard to sometimes to keep folks engaged, and a lot of folks want to multitask. So I kind of like to keep them on their toes.
Cool. Thank you so much, Colin. Anyone else like to share? In that case, I'm going to call on Bo Yi. This time, are your kids running around as well, or have you managed to get the night off? Maybe that's the answer to the question. Alice, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Alice. What's one practice you've used?
Yeah, normally I use the same practice. I will have questions for the audience, and I will collect their feedback and also the practice they have to make connection with them.
Okay. So we've got asking questions and then making sure they have some practice time. They're doing something active. Very nice.
Yeah.
Bree, are you there?
Hello?
Hello. What is one thing that you would like to share?
I don't really have any because I haven't been doing like online engagements, but I'm looking to get into it. So that's why when I saw this opportunity, I decided to just get in and listen to what the people who are doing this have to share so that I can work on my skills.
Great. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have some really practical stuff that you can walk away from this evening. And next time you're online, you'll be able to utilize those straight away. I hope so anyway.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so.
Boyi, I see that you're there. You just didn't turn on your mic. Have you got it turned on now? Maybe not. Or maybe the mic is dead.
Okay.
Totally. I'm not sure. Oh,
hi,
hello.
can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can.
Yes. I just put my twins in the other room there. Good morning. So, gosh, I've always been just in front of a camera by myself in an empty studio, and it's just been like a dump of information. But you know, you can't do that either, because there are really people on the other side, you know, who will eventually see the show. So, you know, I just try to keep things in my mind. Like you said, you know, you're giving a service, really. And you have to have them kind of feel like they're gaining something from it. So it always kind of imagine in my mind that I am talking, you know, to somebody, and they may be on their couches, or they may be in their office, or at the airport, and I just try to give them the most relevant information that I think would, you know, they'd benefit from. And one was also by sometimes asking questions, even though no one's going to answer me. I may ask a question just to kind of give a pause, a pregnant pause, and then continue with the information. So kind of like fake conversation. But that's not the case now. Like I'm not at work. I'm not in China anymore. I'm at home in the States. And so I'm like, okay, I got to learn how to do this whole Zoom thing. I started teaching some kids online, through like Zoom, not Zoom, but a video type thing. I've had 2 classes, and it hasn't been too hard, I think, because there's material we're looking at. So it's not like it's not like I'm really, I mean, I'm giving a class, but I don't know. I guess I just like when I work, just like when I worked in TV, I just focus on the content, and then things organically kind of course, with proper planning, just kind of work and flow. And then I feel like I don't have enough time.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, I can tell you're in content. That's a lot all at once. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate the insight. Really cool. So we're going to start by looking at the audience, and you can see this is a lot of information all on one slide, but I'd like to just leave this on the screen for a while and we can touch on a few of these different points. So first of all, focusing on the audience when the audience is in an online setting is challenging in itself for a lot of the reasons that you guys have mentioned. You know, you've got people that you can't necessarily see or see all at once at the very least. And you don't necessarily get the same kind of response that you would if you were face-to-face. So we're looking at it from 3 different aspects. We're looking at engagement, empathy, and environment. And when it comes to engaging our audience, I think the first thing to really put down there is to set their expectations. Fundamentally, people are not terrible. People are not awful at their core, at least I don't believe. And so if you put a question out there and you get absolute dead silence, it's not because they're just being mean and they hate you and they think what you're presenting isn't any good. It may just be because they're not sure when to share or how to share. They're not sure whether they should go on for a short time or a long time, whether they should put the answers in the chat or whether they should just call out on top of each other, whether they should be observers or whether they should be participants. So setting those expectations up front, maybe even as early as the agenda before the meeting or before the presentation, can really help with getting the type of engagement that you want from them. I think the second point is to give them true reasons to engage. If you're going through and you're just kind of half-heartedly going, what do you think of that? You might not get a true answer back at you. And there's been some research done, and I thought this was fascinating when I read this, that if you have a heart attack on a packed subway carriage, the more people are in that carriage, the less chance there is that you're likely to get helped by any one of them if you're having a heart attack. And the reason I bring that up is I think that's so true when you're in front of any audience. The bigger the audience is, the less of a chance that one person is going to answer you if you just open it up to everybody. And that's true face-to-face. It's especially true online, especially if you've got a ton of people on the call. You may get a few people who jump in, but probably you're going to get the same 3 people who are saying the same few things and answering all the questions for everybody, and you're leaving out 95% of the audience. And then the 5-minute rule. What do I mean by this? Well, this is from a study by Harvard, well, an article, sorry, by Harvard Business Review. And they suggest in this recent article that you shouldn't leave the audience for more than 5 minutes at any one time. Basically, don't monologue. I'll break it up, give people something to do, something to consider, an answer they should give. And let's face it, all of us, when we're speaking, are competing with everyone's email, everyone's social media. I know that there's a number of people on this call right now who have their social media on the exact same screen as they do this presentation. And that's fine. That's just the world we live in. But knowing that as the presenter, what we have to do is just be aware that we're fighting a battle. And if you want people to engage, really go at them and grab them and make sure they're engaging with you. Ask them a direct question. And speaking of which, from those 3 points on engagement, is any of that resonating? Has anyone here experienced any of those things or witnessed these firsthand? Lois, how about you?
Dan? Oh.
Someone just
share?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lois.
Can I ask a question? Or
sure, please do.
Okay. Just branching off what you're saying. My name is X. And just trying to look at engagement and stuff. What then happens when the content or what then happens when the content or the topic at hand is something that's quite sensitive in nature, and so it's not necessarily that you are looking for people to engage, but for example, trying to check in on people just to see that you know people are still there. How then would you engage with them? It's not really
question,
but because like my topics are quite intense. It's not really something that I would ever expect somebody for the first time ever coming, even for the third time, to ever be like, hey, here are my problems. Let everybody who I don't know deal with my problems, you know. I don't even have cameras, and I've never really pushed people to use cameras just because of the content. If you feel more comfortable being hidden and, you know, don't have a face, even though there are names and whatever, it's going to go searching each other. But how then?
Well, I think you've kind of touched on it a little bit there. If you're the one that's arranging these calls and you're the one setting the culture, then I think it's totally cool if you've set the culture already of no cameras. It's a lot more intimate, it's more private, and it's very one way in nature anyway. Then you're probably already setting up your audience to be the observers or be the listeners. And that's okay. It really depends on what the purpose of the presentation is. If it's something that you want to be interactive and you're trying to get engagement, then I think then it becomes a bit tricky if you fall into these patterns of allowing them to become passive listeners. But if it's something you want them to be, just tuning in and listening, then by all means, that's great.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you very much. I love the question. No, it's great. In terms of empathy, I think the first point that we have up here is that for many of us, we may not have done a Zoom call, maybe at all, and certainly maybe not regularly. How many of us here were using Zoom like this on a weekly basis before January of this year? I mean, you can go ahead and put yes or no into the WeChat group. Yes. Oh, Maria was for sure. Yeah, with your work, definitely. Okay, good. A few no's. No, yeah. Yeah, so that's just it. That this isn't necessarily such a common medium for every single person. So it may be the case that even on this call, Boyi has twins running around in the background. That's awesome. That's just a part of family life that's going on in lockdown for so many people around the world today. This is a new medium, and with that brings new challenges. And so you may have someone's child pop onto the camera, say hello, like during a business meeting, and you've got one of two choices. You can either just ignore it totally and hope that, you know, things progress. I guess three choices. You could call that out and say, hey, look, everybody, Brian's son is on camera. Let's all say hello to Brian's son, and kind of call it out in a kind of mean-spirited way, which I don't think any of us here would do. Or you can just politely engage and say, hi, is your dad there or is your mum there, and kind of get on with it in that kind of more natural way. Another way to show empathy, I believe, is just purely by addressing people by name. It's a sign of arrogance in many cultures to never use people's names when you're talking to them, or certainly to not even try to remember people's names. What's a great thing about calls like these is everyone's names, or at least a tagline that they're happy being addressed by, you can actually talk to them directly and call them out that way. And I think that's a real sign of humility. And third, offer recaps. This is one of the most compassionate things you can do in a presentation. Talk about what you have already been through, so that if people are joining halfway, they know what you've already covered and they know what's still to come. Out of interest, so far we've covered setting expectations, we've covered giving reasons to engage and keeping people busy for every 5 minutes. And we've talked through it's new for us too, and people should be addressed by name, and we should offer recaps. The environment, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, the environment on the call itself. Have you ever walked into a party where the atmosphere is dead cold, no one is talking to each other, and it's just an incredibly unfriendly place to walk into? I think we've all experienced that, and it's not a place we want to stay. The same is true for these rooms online. If there's a little bit of a lively atmosphere, people seem engaged, maybe there's a bit of laughter and some human interaction, then it may be a place we would want to stay. If it's just a dead silent room and maybe there's someone who's just looking at their watch and waiting for the time to strike at exactly the right minute so that they can begin, I don't know about you, but that just reminds me of really bad teachers in school who refused to talk to you before the class started. And those are not memories I care to relive. No awkward waiting. If you're the one giving the presentation, you're not a rock star. You don't need to burst on stage as soon as it begins. You can just keep people warm and engaged and talk to them like a human until things get started. And I think that's something that's done so infrequently at the moment. Very often it's like starts bang on the moment it's scheduled for, and there's no real kind of warm atmosphere going on before we get started. Even on this call, it wasn't kind of as engaged as I would like it, and I'd love people's input into how to get this going in a natural way online. Maria's just asked, how do you do that warm up? I think one thing you can do is maybe have a question on screen that everyone kind of starts discussing as you come in. But to be quite honest, Maria, I would love everyone's input on this as well. This is an idea that I think desperately needs to start happening. But in terms of how to really facilitate that and get that going, it is challenging, I think. And it's probably why we don't see it done as much as perhaps we should. So let's throw that out there. Is that Anne? X, go ahead.
Something that does sort of work for engagement, just before you start your meeting, usually there is some sort of WeChat group or something group. So what you could then do in the group, so usually like you would say, okay guys, we're about to start, here's the Zoom code or whatever it is. It's very technical information, but then you can always pose a conversation or throw in a topic there, so that it kind of gives people an idea what to because they kind of know you're going to engage. At least they know there's going to be an icebreaker and where the icebreaker is going. There's a question, so they come in with a potential answer. And so when you throw it in the air, people aren't thinking on the spot, especially for people who might not be comfortable with just talking on the spot. So that might just give some sort of ease before you actually start in that WeChat, whatever group that you have elsewhere. Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, I think that's a nice suggestion. Anne says she asks people to join 5 minutes before, so they're in place and you just start general chatting. I love that idea as well. And certainly if that's something you're really comfortable with, getting people interacting and mingling in that way, then I think that can always work. How about other people? Can you please go ahead and either type something into the chat box, or if you'd like to just share in about 30 seconds or so, if you can keep it kind of brief, then please go ahead and say your name and then start sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
This is Colin again. I'll
yes.
share
Thanks,
something.
Colin.
Yeah, and excuse the sound, but my little boy's playing with his toy with his mommy. One of the things I do is, and I think every facilitator, every presenter, whoever is sort of leading the meeting needs to let their personality shine. So I always say, guys, if you came here to be quiet, yada yada, this is not the call for you, right? Because I do ask folks to engage, and what that does is let some folks who nobody ever drops off, right? And I don't call everybody out, but it lets them know what that energy is. And I do in a way that people get energized. So I think it's part of it having your personality shine, and also trying to make sure that people are not just engaged but interested throughout. So that's one tactic I do. I sort of try to be very clear and set that stage without trying to force people to be, something they're not.
Thanks very much for sharing, Colin. Very nice. And that's adorable, by the way, hearing your baby in the background. That's just so wonderful. Nice real world reminder. I love your point about bringing your personality to the table. And I think that's such a valuable point. Doing what you feel most comfortable with and feeling, at home, maintaining a professional kind of demeanor, but also, talking to people like they're people, like they're human. And they have, their own kind of wants and expectations. I think being a little bit too distant and a bit too almost objectifying, talking to people like they're not people, really puts up a barrier between presenter and participant. So yeah, fantastic contribution. Cheers for that. Maria says she goes around the room or has seen people going around the room saying, how are you? Where are you? Are you safe? Are you safe? That's an interesting question in these times. Anne says she gets people to write in the chat box where they are because her meetings are often global. Lovely icebreaker. Yeah, for sure. Any other contributions?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Who's that?
Oh, great. This is Nda, N-D-A.
Hey, Nda.
Yeah. So I think it's really, I find it really interesting about keeping people engaged, but I also feel that sometimes people engage in their own ways. So, you might feel more comfortable getting people talking to you, but just because someone's not necessarily typing or something like that, I don't think necessarily means that they're not engaged. And just going back a little bit to how to keep people engaged, I think sometimes one thing we didn't mention was the visual cues. I think those can be quite useful, especially like someone like me, I sort of tend to have a short attention span. So sometimes I'll be focused on what you're saying. Sometimes I'll be focused on what's written on the screen. So I just think it's good to be sort of flexible and not overthink sometimes the reaction that you think people are giving you.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. I think that's such a great point because when we have our in our own house face on, often when we're watching YouTube or when we're engaging as a passive watcher, our face isn't going to be as responsive as it is when you're in a live audience. You're not necessarily going to be giving the same visual feedback to the presenter that you would if you were face to face. And so as a presenter, if I'm seeing my audience is kind of looking a little bit switched off or not really bothered, that's going to throw me potentially. And just, I think knowing that ahead of time goes a long, long way to facilitating a better call. Really good points there, and thank you for that. Let's move on to the tech setup. And I want to stress the point, first of all, that I am by no means a technician. I think that was very evident in our last call. So please do take what I share here more as some personal experience and a bit of opinion from different bits and pieces that I've read and what I think works. But I'd be very interested to hear what different people do to set up their tech, what they do to test it, what that checking process looks like, how long it takes, all of those things. And first of all, I just want to start by saying, when it comes to tech, there really is only one law on any of these calls, and it's Murphy's Law. That is, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And again, I hate to keep harping on our previous call, but yes. My wife is a 5th grade English teacher, and she had to give a presentation at the end of last academic year, and she's been talking about this ever since, that she was dreading. It was to the entire school. She was so nervous ahead of time, bless her. And, you know, we practiced a little bit ahead of time. And one thing that she was really keen to get right is making sure, at least if the tech is okay, at least if the projector's working, at least if the mic's working, at least if my PPT is going to go ahead of, is going to go as planned, then that'll be fine. I'll just get through it. So the day comes and she gets to school about 3 hours early and goes into the auditorium and she checks everything's working fine. And you can guess where this is going. As soon as the moment came, she was on stage, the mic cut out, the projector stopped working, the PPT all of a sudden didn't load, and she had a meltdown on stage. she just yelled out, talk amongst yourselves. And what can you do? Like, in those settings, when you're face to face, at least you can talk amongst yourselves. That's a bit more difficult to facilitate when you're in an online setting. You can't just say, talk to your partner. Who's my partner? We're all in our separate houses. It doesn't necessarily do the same thing that it would when it's face to face. You don't necessarily have the same crutches. So this is what we're going to look at to check our tech and look at some different aspects of how we can best set up. And here's a question. What's one tech improvement that you'd like to make to your current setup? What's something you know needs to be improved? Go ahead, type your answers into the chat box if you're able to, and let's get a good selection. Webcam for Isabel. Microphone, okay. Yeah, wow. And that's a great point from Maria. Kudos to Isabel for facilitating very well last time. Yeah, for sure. Webcam, yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting. Webcam, microphone. Ah, the phone lighting. Interesting. Does that mean you use your phone to light your face? Isabel, I'm going to call on you if you don't mind. How does that work?
So yes, because you know, if I don't put my phone, I'm like, my webcam is bad, right? So I took the phone and I put it. Wait. So I put it on and I put it here in front of my screen, so you can see me better, right?
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, great. We've got microphone, we've got lighting. Yeah, lighting's a big one. Background or yeah, the backdrop. We'll be talking about all of these things in just a moment. Kazito, let's go to you. You mentioned the background or the backdrop. Yeah, what are you working with at the moment?
Well, that's why my video is off.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, you have to deal with a lot of things. Well, you know me. I'm in the like video visual kind of industry, and we spoke about this last time you had a meeting, and it was basically about lighting in the room and what your background looks like. I mean, it's cute, but you sort of have to deal with having like your children's art on the wall, and you have to deal with having your personal you're in your personal space, but you sort of have to make it suitable for the meeting that you're having. And it's just difficult in small spaces, since we're all well, most of us are still confined to our homes for these meetings. So it's a bit of work trying to find the right background for the kind of meeting you'll be having.
Yeah, a great point. Thank you so much for sharing. And you've just said a lot of people sit with their back to the window, so you've got the light coming in from behind and not enough on their face, and that creates a big problem. What about for you? What's your current setup?
Okay, I'll switch on my mic.
Oh, sorry, I meant you don't have to if you don't want to, because I was asking Anne if
no. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No problem at all.
My current setup is I'm just on my laptop at the moment, but I make sure I try and make sure I have the lighting enough and not too many background noises. At the moment, there's a lot here, but I've got the mic off. And if I'm holding a presentation, also what room I'm in, what kind of sound is it? Is it dampened, or is it very open, very echo? Yeah, especially if I'm presenting.
That's an interesting one. Have you, or indeed has anyone experimented with dampening any of their their walls, like putting up kind of soft furnishings, curtains everywhere, trying to make it a little bit less echoey. Has that been happening for anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Everyone's getting very creative with their interior design these days. Clearly, it's nice. Okay. So, okay, great.
Screen.
Gotcha. Yeah, cool. Very nice indeed. Okay, so we're going to look at this from, again, 3 different angles. One is your frame. The next one is the tech that you should be checking, and we'll talk about each of these in turn, as well as lighting, which I completely forgot to put on there, and techniques, different aspects of performing for a camera or in this setting that may just improve your performance just a little bit. First, when it comes to knowing your frame, whereabouts should you be positioned in relation to the camera? So a general piece of advice that I've seen given a lot is that a lot of people have their device kind of a little bit too underneath them. If you're sat with your laptop on your desk and you're looking down at your camera or at your screen, chances are people are going to be seeing up your nose a little bit and kind of looking up at you, which is, you know, we're all used to that view from having video calls with people, but it's not necessarily the best view in the world. And for a professional setting, one thing I'd recommend is just getting your camera up to eye level. So a very simple way of doing that is a stack of books. If you've got anything that you can kind of put your laptop up onto or mount your camera onto, that's always going to be better than just staring down at your screen. When it comes to the rule of thirds, what you want is your eyes to be roughly 2/3 of the way up your frame. So you don't want your eyes to be all the way down here. You don't want to be kind of off to the side too much. And you certainly don't want, you know, any of your face kind of obstructed by the frame that you've decided to set. In addition, I'm not a massive fan of the shaky hand cam. You know, a lot of people will selfie using their phones and just hold their phone and kind of move around all over the place. It's not the best. People get easily seasick, and I would suggest just kind of mounting the camera, having it stationary as much as possible. It's going to be much kinder to your viewers. The edge. This has a big, big effect on gestures. So right now, my hands are on the table. They can't be seen, and they're not impacting my message at all. So if I want to gesture, I basically have to move up here. That's super unnatural. It's really weird for me to have my hands up here. I feel like I'm kind of crunching up, and it doesn't feel like a natural position to present from. But if I want my hands to speak at all, I know I have to get them a lot closer to my face. And this is a work in progress for me. It feels so weird and unnatural. The thing I want to do when I'm sat at a table is to just leave my hands in my lap or on the keyboard and not to bring them up. But if I'm going to use them effectively, you have to bring them into frame. And I know this is looking weird. I'm a little bit too aware of it at the moment, but bear with me. What your backdrop says about you. Well, a few people, not necessarily on this call, you see some pretty wild and crazy things on backdrops. You see people walking in and out of the frame, sometimes semi-dressed, depending on what time of the day or night it is, and what the other people in your house are doing. Color clashes is a big one. Knowing what's behind you, what color that is, and what you're wearing, and whether that's either going to clash or be a little bit too close in color, and it's not going to quite complement itself well. The best thing I can advise here is just to experiment. You know, get your camera up and going, and then just basically, you know, experiment with different shirt choices, different jacket choices. Maria, I'm really glad you posed this question. What's my opinion on the Zoom background picture things? Yeah, a virtual background. So sometimes they can be really good. Sometimes, depending on where you are, it's better than what you've got. And I think if you're manually uploading the image you're using, you can kind of hand pick something that looks okay. for your background, and you can kind of move around on top of it. Again, be wary of color clashes. You don't want anything that's too busy on a virtual background. And I think it's so easy to get unprofessional so quickly. Like, oh, look, Bill's on the beach, or like, oh, look, he's on a train. Like, it gets very gimmicky very fast. So as much as possible, I would go with a real background. I think that looks a lot more authentic and lends a little bit of human connection between you and the people you're talking to. You know, preferably not a bedroom, of course, but a plain wall or something not so busy in the background that people are going to be distracted and concentrating on, I would say is usually a safe bet. So yeah, the rule of thirds for where you want your face to be in the frame, making sure your gestures kind of come into the shot, and then making sure what your backdrop says about you is what you want it to say. Does anyone have any points they want to chime in there? Any previous experience for setting up a frame? Any experience using gestures on camera and what that process has been like for you? Or has anyone had any really great experiences with virtual backgrounds? Yeah, please do chime in and let us know.
Yes, previously I was talking with Colin actually about those virtual backgrounns. And we did a test and he showed me a bit. And yes, I have to say it's looking like a bit weird, especially if you can see that is not authentic. So you actually destroy all the effects that you want to give because it's not on point, I think. But I've been also thinking about maybe, for example, a TV, but I didn't figure it out yet, like this TV. I want to put, for example, the logo, you know, of Teranga Valley, and then being facing it. So yes, it's still ongoing. But I think it reveals a lot, because to avoid to think, it's also for engagement, because when you think, okay, we all at home, we all like spending time in a small room, or I don't know, like it doesn't feel like we are engaged in the the professional setting. So yes, I've also been working on that, and I like to know more other people views about that. Maybe it depends on the topic of the event as well. Maybe if you want just people to relax and just sharing, it's better to see you in your living room. I think it depends on the topic of the event.
Yeah, and I like your point. Making sure if you're going to have a logo on a backdrop behind you, making sure it's to the side so it looks professional. I've seen a few different setups where maybe you've got two hosts and you have one on either side of the frame, and then maybe the screen either put on in post or projected kind of using a piece of like screen sharing software there, or you can just literally have a TV with the PowerPoint being displayed behind you kind of to the side. And I've seen that work quite well on some calls, and on others it's been ruined by, say, the lighting, where there's light bouncing off the TV screen, and that hasn't worked particularly well. Yeah, a little bit, Maria, kind of hope maybe kind of answering your question, but Anne, please do jump in and help Maria there. There's plenty going on in the chat box at the moment if you're not able to see that. Would anyone else like to share on their experience setting up their frame or setting up their backdrop?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
We can, Boyi.
Okay, so I had a really embarrassing situation yesterday with my second class, and my power on my computer died. And my computer is a Huawei, and it only plugs into the outlet in my kitchen. And so I had to go to my kitchen, and so I didn't have the backdrop I had set up. And like my kitchen isn't like the most tidy. I've got like files and my printer and kids stuff, and so that was really embarrassing. And so I was like, oh my God, if this ever happens again, like I've got to have a backup of like what I'm gonna do. And so yeah, that was, I just thought I'd throw that out there because I hate to have someone else be embarrassed by like moving their Zoom meeting to another part of their house. But yeah, but luckily though, I found out that my plug actually does work in the outlet where I'm normally working. But have a backup. Have a backup, guys.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for the next part as well, for all of the tech that you've got to check. If at all possible, having a backup solution is a wonderful piece of advice. So let's jump into that. The tech that needs to be checked. Boye, if you could go ahead and mute your mic again, that would be wonderful. Thank you. The tech that needs to be checked. We're going to start with the microphone. Usually, the mic that's on your device isn't very good. So any kind of external mic or mic that you may have on headphones is almost always going to be a better bet than using the mic just on your phone or just on your device, pretty much all the time. I'm using a mic, like a freestanding mic that's just down here off the frame. It doesn't have to be anything really, really fancy. I'm using what's called a Samsung Meteor. It's a fairly small mic, fairly inexpensive. You can find it on Taobao if you're based in China, Amazon if not. But usually a set of headphones, just simple corded Apple headphones with a mic on them, are going to be a pretty good bet. And don't think that just because it's a mic, it needs to be right up close to your mouth. It really doesn't. It's a microphone. It's designed to pick up your voice. So I've seen people on calls holding the mic like really close to their mouth, and that is so annoying. Quite often it might rub against someone's beard. That's worth bearing in mind. So a mic is designed to pick up sound. If you're going to move it around, you're going to pick up all of that sound. Just bear that in mind. Headphones. Why would I recommend having headphones on a call? Feedback. If you've got a mic that's picking up the noise that's coming out of your speakers as people are talking, then you're going to get that coming back through the microphone, and people are going to hear echo. They're going to hear a bit of lag potentially. They're going to hear weird kind of digital distortion noises. So it's best to avoid that by having a set of headphones that are wired, not Bluetooth, not any kind of wireless headphones, because let's be honest, cords tend to work more reliably than Bluetooth does. And if you've got a lot of people on a call, anything can go wrong, and sometimes does. Webcam, I would say often the same applies to the mic. A fairly inexpensive webcam can often be a lot better than the one on your computer or on your phone. Not always. Make sure that you get one kind of a mid-range external webcam, maybe just a USB one that can be plugged in. Read your reviews. The same goes for all of this tech. Make sure you do your homework and read the reviews before you buy, but then trust your gut. Go for something that's not going to break the bank if it's not essential to your job, and test around and see if you can see some different results from different machinery. If you have a friend who has one and you want to try theirs out, even better. My one piece of advice for using a PPT or for using any kind of audio video on a call like this is the more people you have on the call, the higher chances that a lot of things won't work. So ideally a PPT that has a very low file size, meaning less media, less images, less embedded audio or video, is generally going to be a lot more reliable. If you've tested it and you're 100% sure that your Wi-Fi connection can stand that, or you're using wired internet and you've done it before and it works great, fantastic, go for it. But these are desperate times, and for a lot of people, we're just using our home Wi-Fi setup, which isn't always the best. Mine certainly isn't. So let's jump in and see what people's suggestions are there. Is there some kind of advice you would give on specific tech setup? Maybe even particular brands that you would favor over others? Is there something that you found really successful? Go ahead, chime in or write it into the Zoom group chat.
Hi Dan, Maria here. I just wanted to chime in. I know that Anne asked a question in the chat. For tech, I don't have any external stuff. I was planning on doing that, then I got stranded here, so I'm like, whatever. I love my computer. My computer is a Dell XP, but my camera is all the way in the left corner on like the left bottom corner of my computer. That's why now I have like two like books propping up my computer, so it's kind of a kind of not right. But for Anne, for the standing, because I think Da asked a question like standing or sitting while presenting. Which is an interesting question, and because I did that last week, and as I was telling Dan and the call on Friday, I had a step ladder, like basically with this backdrop, but a little skewed. So I had the light from the window, and I was looking at my computer was basically at my eye level. And as you can see, I'm Italian. I do gesticulate a lot, and when I do workshops, I like go around the room and I have to move. And so, like if it's a standard meeting, I have no problem sitting down. But if it's a workshop or something I have to facilitate, then I find it so much better for my personal mindset of like, I can take a step back, a step forward. Like I'm not moving around too much, but I feel it gives a little bit more energy. Also, hopefully, to people who see that. I don't know.
Yeah, great point, Maria. I love the idea of having a standing setup, especially if you're a lot more high energy and you use gestures a lot. I think it just gives you a lot more range to be able to do that. Not always possible for everybody necessarily, although I love your improvisation with the ladder and kind of making it work for you. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
someone else looks to be chiming in.
I was also there. I was also there at that, it was last week event. And I have to say it makes it feel real because we are used to be sitting and watching someone giving a presentation. So I felt that when Maria was standing, it was given an extra more energy, an extra more feeling of reality. Because she was really moving, and I think it gave something a plus because we are used now to have these settings that everyone is seated and everyone is talking. But the fact that she was standing, I think it was outstanding.
That's awesome. Okay, we're going to move.
Also.
Go ahead, Colin. Just if you can share a little briefly, that would be great.
Yeah, sometimes people who wear glasses have the glare in their eyeglasses. One thing I've done is when they come from the computer screen, I put a piece of paper over my computer screen because I'm speaking, I need to see my screen, and it cuts off the glare totally.
Nice. Lovely little hack there. Thank you very much for that. All right. One technique that I think is so easily implemented that so few people do is just to look at the camera. Instead of looking at the screen, or down to the side, or reading something over here, or looking at people's faces, often we can get stuck on people's faces that actually are not looking at us from that position. They're looking at us from the camera. So just focusing on that is such a simple thing we can all be doing, that we can walk away and start doing that straight away. Setting up your station, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, kind of having something that allows you movement, freedom of movement, but also is sturdy. Maybe it's books, maybe it's having stuff up at eye level. I love this improvisation that Maria suggested with the ladder. I love the creativity of Boyi getting into the kitchen and finding something that worked for her there. So that's great. And then finally, just the value of a tech rehearsal. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And if you haven't checked it before you get to the big day, stuff goes wrong. I can tell you the last call on Thursday, I spent a solid 2 hours checking the tech. Seemed to all be going fine. And we had issues. We had a lot of big issues. I thank God that so far we haven't had any big issues on this call. But yeah, lots of time testing, making sure you know what works for you, and really taking the time there to give it its due respect, not just for the tech, but also for your content and knowing what you're using. If you're sharing your screen, how's that going to work when you're on the call? If you're facilitating breakout sessions, making sure you know how to do that ahead of time, whatever it may be. So finally, I really want to make the point that performance skills are so important online. They just take a slightly different form. Now, I remember very recently, it was in January, as things were starting to blow up with the coronavirus worldwide, well, especially in China. And there were a lot of different commentators coming onto the news and giving their opinions about what the virus was all about and how it might progress and everything else. Well, I saw a, a home interview done on a major news channel with a professor from Imperial College London, or some such university. I believe it was one of the major London universities. So he had big time credentials, great qualifications, amazing institution, and by all accounts, like one of the top people in his field. But when he came on camera, like he was scrunched into his chair and there was light bouncing off of his forehead, and it was in a bad setting, and his voice was kind of just muffled, and he was speaking into a mic that was kind of off here. There was loads of background noise. And for me, that just totally threw me off. My impression of him far outweighed all of his qualifications and credentials. So what I would say is that right now, the level of performance online is pretty low. There's so much content out there and so few people are really standing out. So if you just work on your performance skills even a little bit, what I'm talking about is your vocal quality and your use of body language on a call. If you try to just go a little bit above average, I promise you're going to stand out far more than the very low average. So yeah, it's all about making small upgrades so that we can stand out. And I want to hear from you, what is your biggest strength? Generally, is your voice a little bit stronger, or is your body language a little bit stronger? That can be traditionally face-to-face, or it can be on a call as well. For this one, I'm going to give you a few seconds, and then I'm going to call on a few people that we haven't maybe heard from. Shu Wei, are you there? Maybe not. Yulia, are you there? Maybe not. Sabs, are you there? Ah, Yulia is here. You. Oh.
Go ahead.
Sabs, what's your biggest strength? Is it your voice or is it your use of body language?
I would probably say my voice. I think my voice sometimes can carry, yeah, I would just say my voice, because sometimes I am able to get across things or points without having to use my body language and using inflection and so on, that my voice can be used in that way better, I think.
Cool, thank you. Kwame, how about for you? Your voice or your body language?
My body language, because I kind of speak on a low tone, so my body language does.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good to be aware of those things. Yulia, you say you are here. Are you able to chat here? Voice or body language for you?
Hello, my name is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Yes. Actually, I think the English is not the first language. Sometimes I think the tongue is not up and down. So some like the very flat. But in terms of the body language, I think it may be better than my voice, I think.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to look at a few different aspects from speaking so that people will listen to us, and why body language matters in an online setting. And these are the main areas that we'll be addressing. I'm going to go pretty quick through these. We're a little short on time this evening. But yeah, I'll just kind of share on each of these. And then afterwards, I'd love to get people's perspective on best practices for each of these. So when it comes to clarity, I think one big point is that when you're online, mumbling is death. You want to make sure as much as possible you are over enunciating, over articulating your words. And one easy way to do that is to take video specifically of your mouth as you're speaking. It sounds like a weird thing to do, or even just use a mirror for this. Maybe if you have a mirror at your desk, and look, how much does your mouth actually move? How wide does it go as you're speaking? And try as much as possible to really extend that range. Make it as large, overstress the words as much as you can. Reading kids' books and reading newspaper articles is a great way to do that. I can hear a little bit of background noise. I think, Wendy, you may be unmuted. If yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. Wonderful. Pacing. Generally, I would say, although it's really good advice to slow down when you want to suggest something serious or important, and to speed up if something's exciting or you're passionate about. While that's true, I would say to shift those things towards the slower end of the spectrum when you're in an online setting. It's very easy to go way too fast. Just because you know your content, it doesn't mean anyone else that are listening are familiar with anything that you're going to be talking about. So really slow down. It's a sign of compassion for your audience. If you slow down, pause a lot, give them time to digest. If you're one of these people that rambles, if every sentence is and so, and so, and so, and so, and so, your tone is never going to give the right indication that you're done with a sentence. And why that's important is people generally digest the last thing that you say in the sentence. So you want to be stressing short, sharp sentences that end with a downward inflection. If you're one of these people that goes up at the end of sentences, like everything's a question, which has sometimes been said it's a California thing, it's sometimes been said it's a female thing, it's sometimes been said it's a millennial thing, it's all of us, many of us do this. So just bear that in mind and make sure you're going down at the end of sentences to command authority as you speak. And showing a bit of emotion, especially online, through a microphone, through someone's speakers or headphones, it's very, very easy to sound monotone. Really try to expand that range. If you know that you have a tendency to be a little bit either monotone or mono pitch or mono rhythm, really try and experiment with the sing-song nature of your voice. Again, kids' books are fabulous for this. Reading so that it comes alive with your voice, making sure that each synonym, every syllable is really stressed, really pushed out towards the camera, and yeah, just make the most of your words. Let's hear from a few people on vocal quality. Is there anyone that has something they've picked up over the years that's really helped them with their voice? Reading poems, says X. Yeah, that's really nice for sure. Whether there's a rhyme scheme or not, I think it really helps to put emotion into our voice when we're reading poetry. Cool. All right, reading poems, watching other people. Yeah, mimicking is a really good point. Reading any books aloud. Thanks for that, Kate. Yeah, really nice. Okay. Smiling. Yes, a really great point. We're going to touch on this with facial expression, but yeah, listening to podcasts. Yes, depending on the podcast, depending on the host, but almost certainly. Shadowing TED Talks. That's a very, very nice suggestion. Copying their cadence, copying the way that they pause and inflect. Reading aloud in front of the mirror. I would go one better and potentially record it and listen back to yourself. Everyone has recording devices in their pockets these days. You can use your phone. We have Zoom. You can use the recording feature when you're on camera, either to record just the audio or just to record just the video. And you can work being self-analytical on what your face is actually doing or how your voice actually sounds. Is that a voice you want to listen to? Great. Isabel says, going to events every week and practice. Very nice indeed. So why does body language matter online? Well, the biggest reason is that even if your camera is not on, when you're using your hands, when you're gesticulating, when you're sitting upright, you're going to be using all of the muscles that are needed to have really good vocal quality. Your voice is not going to sound alive and dynamic if you're sat hunched not gesticulating at all and just talking down towards yourself. Your voice is going to naturally sound less alive by doing that. So posture is a good one. If any of you are familiar with the British TV show Downton Abbey and period dramas like that, around that time in history in the UK, it was not uncommon to have a knife stuck on the back of one's chair to force you to sit upright like this so that you would have good posture and you would look a certain way. I'm not suggesting anyone on this call goes to those extremes, of course, but posture is so important to make sure the diaphragm is engaged. And one way to do that is if you are sitting down on one of these calls, just shuffle to the front of your chair, plant your feet into the ground and really engage your core. And that's going to give you a much more dynamic sounding voice. And you're going to look a little bit more professional as well by not being slouched on camera. Gestures, like I say, making sure they're on camera. If you're trying to gesticulate, but your hands are down here and they're not really seen, kind of what's the point? There's a piece of advice I would typically give that you don't want to have unnatural gestures, but I think in an online setting, gesticulating in a frame that's only so big is always going to feel unnatural. So I would really watch yourself, watch videos of yourself presenting, watch back and really analyze what looks natural, what doesn't, where should my hands be, and how can I become more comfortable with having my hands a little bit higher than they usually are. Facial expression. Sabs put it perfectly. The best facial expression you can have on any of these calls is a smile. Remember that even if you're stressed and nervous about what you're presenting, if you come on with a stone face, that's exactly what you're going to get mirrored from your audience. No one's going to be smiling back at you, and that's going to play on your nerves. Walking in with a smile puts everyone at ease, generally, unless you have a super creepy smile, of course. But in general, a very natural, warm smile is going to put people at ease. It's going to be friendly, inviting, and people will want to listen to you and be persuaded round to your way of thinking. And the opposite's also true. If you don't, then not. Eye contact, the biggest thing I can say is just look at the camera. Eye contact on an online setting doesn't take place if you're looking down here or you're looking over here or you're checking your notes too frequently. We all do it, but as much as possible, try and work the camera by looking directly into the camera and making eye contact for your audience. So knowing this, knowing these different aspects of performance, looking at clarity, pacing, pausing and emotion for our voice, looking at posture, gestures, facial expression, and eye contact for our body language, what is the one aspect that you know you need to work on the most once we're done with this call? Yeah, go ahead and put your answers into the chat box here, and I might call on people to elaborate. Anne says having the notes behind the camera or as close to the camera as possible. Yeah, that's great. Some people I know have worked with teleprompters as well, or phone teleprompters. Depends on how much content you have and how well you've prepared with it. Isabel says her voice and articulating. Cool. Hiding the camera to avoid looking at yourself more. Completely agree. And Da, you mentioned gestures. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Me. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah. Just trying to find gestures that seem natural. I think that's the hardest thing, is trying to gesture without overdoing it. So I think that's why it's a challenge for me, because it's something that I feel that I need to work on, because I feel like if I'm doing it and I'm thinking about doing it, then I overthink what each gesture means, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. And I think having the video feed of yourself on there as well, sometimes we might catch ourselves making a gesture that we think is a bit unnatural. And we're like, it kind of reinforces this negative voice that's in your head of, oh, that doesn't look so good. So you do it less. And then you're like, I'm not doing it at all. And before too long, it's playing on your nerves and affecting your performance. I think one way, something that a piece of advice I had given to me a few years ago about gestures and coming up with natural gestures is that if you look at a tree, if you wanted the tree to have better branches, you wouldn't just attach a branch onto the tree. You would give it water, you would give it sunlight, and you would allow those branches to grow naturally from within. And I love that metaphor, that whatever the meaning of what it is you're talking about, that's the place you should start. Like, what's the meaning that's inside what you're trying to communicate? And let your hands naturally do the talking as you're thinking about the meaning. Don't worry too much about, I need to do this gesture at that time when I want to say this. Just focus really hard on the meaning of what you're saying and how much you want to stress or accentuate certain things. And then be self-analytical, watch back and say, okay, I can maybe do this a little more. Don't think about putting one whole new fake gesture on top. That's something I had given to me a little while ago. Finding the right words, says Kerry. Yeah, that's tricky for sure. Bree says posture. Maria says to speak slower.
Yeah. Guys, someone wants to say hi. 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
How are you?
It's my daddy.
Hello. We're doing all right, thank you. How are you doing?
You are good.
Good to hear, thank you.
Good body language, Papa.
Awesome.
Speak English, French.
Yes, I only speak un peu, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I have one question that I'd like to present to everybody here as we finish, and that's, what was your key takeaway from this webinar, and what is maybe one question that you still have about presenting online? I realize we're running a little bit over here, guys, so if you have to go, by all means, that's totally fine. You know, if you have someplace else to be, I completely respect that, and I don't hold you. I don't hold it against you. So feel free to head on out when you would like. Otherwise, let's keep chatting. What was the big takeaway for you? And what's one question you maybe still have? Again, maybe answers into the chat box, and we'll take the answers from there. Maria says she needs to work on her lighting and her background set. Interesting. Anne says keeping the audience engaged. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Anne?
Yes, Anne. Or is that X?
X. I do have a question. So if you have instances where I'm not really sure how other people experience this, because I'm looking at your time and you're sort of comfortably sitting on an hour and so. One Zoom that I have is, I'm not sure if I could call it the Chinese version, and it only allowed for me to have
40 minutes.
And
yeah.
so then I got a South African version, if you will. I'm not really sure what the discrepancy is or whatever.
Yeah.
And one allowed for 40 minutes and the other one like literally was like no time limits and almost like your audience amount doesn't matter either. And then all of a sudden, like it dropped to like 40 minutes again. But that's from a technical point question.
Yeah. So my understanding for that one, X, is that on the basic package, usually people can only have a 40-minute call with more than one. Oh, someone's mic is on there. I think it's maybe speaking to somebody else, maybe not speaking to us. All right. What I was going to say is on the basic package, you get 40 minutes with more than one person. But usually, if you've got the upgraded package, or for some reason, certain countries may be offering like a certain amount of calls with a larger audience without paying for an additional package, then yes, you may well have that. But it may be the case that you got one free call that way, and you may have to upgrade. Yeah.
Okay, so then that would then lead, let's just stick to assuming that I'm sitting on a 40 minutes. If for whatever reason you are then put in a situation where you have to actually stop a workshop, whatever, how would you then transition people to know it's about, I mean, people are aware of the time and they kind of can see on the screen and whatever, but how do you transition people from a good story or a good whatever that you're doing to such a way that it's almost like an ad break and still sort of get people to come back with the same enthusiasm? And because like the first time it happens, people are very easy. They're in within 5 seconds. But then the second time, and also considering the fact that it's like now 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, you know, that break allows people to remember, oh, I was baking. Oh, I'm actually tired. Oh, I didn't do this, you know, and it kind of does reduce people coming back. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, I think the same kind of techniques apply from television from years ago. You know, if you're going to let someone go to an ad break, chances are people are going to flick around and look for something else to watch or to engage with. So leaving the audience with a bit of a hook may be a good idea. Like, we're going to be coming back in 10 minutes, and give them a reason to come back. When you come back, we will be doing this, that, and you'll be able to get this that you haven't looked at already. You know, some kind of basic hook, some reason to return. You may not have the exact same amount of returnees, but you'll keep some of them. Yeah, some really nice points in the chat here that I want to highlight. Bree saying it's important to engage the audience in a way they feel connected to you, talk to them like humans. Yeah, totally agree. Boyi, a really nice point here about keeping text simple. Very nice indeed. Kwame, you had a really good point that it's actually the Chinese basic package that you have unlimited time on Zoom. I wasn't aware of that. That's great. Maybe I need to change over from the US to the Chinese then.
Kwame, help! What? Help!
Kwame, you're going to have to connect with X after the call and help her along, it seems. And Da says, had a sense of complacency before. Yeah, I think that's totally understandable. But as much as we would like to, you know, it's so easy to be average. And at this point, the average is not that high, as mentioned. So just by upgrading a few little things, you can really give a lot more value to your audience than perhaps you would otherwise. Some really great points in the chat. Guys, if you don't have the chat up at the moment, I really suggest you go there and check out everyone's contributions. There's some really good points that people have taken the time to write out. Lois has a question. She says, how to keep people engaged and focused for a one-day virtual meeting? 1 day? Do you mean like 8 hours, Lois?
Have
yes,
some
8
breaks.
hours.
Have some breaks.
Yeah, big time. I would say break it up as much as possible. Give specific reasons and sessions. Really diversify the content and the speakers. You do not want one person speaking for even this long, frankly. I think it's much better to really break it up. If you're able to have a co-host or multiple people giving sessions, that would be fine. But the simple answer is keeping anyone engaged for an entire day is tough face-to-face. In these settings, really difficult. So I'd love to hear some of your feedback. Maybe if that's something you're planning on doing, I'd love to hear how it goes and what people do. We're going to be finishing off in just a moment, but I just want to let everybody know a little bit more about who I am and what I do. These were the 3 areas we focused on today. Just to recap, focusing on our audience, making sure we check our tech before we get on a call and giving tech its due respect, and performing online. So I work for a company called Engage. I founded this company last year, and I help exec startup founders, other business leaders through workshops, through coaching, and through community events. Generally, I help corporates, but I also help kind of all levels of business and corporate life. I do this a few different ways. We do workshops, we do one-on-one and small group coaching sessions, and we do community events like the Breakfast Pitch, which is one you see here. That hasn't been running for a little while. I know there are a few alums from the Breakfast Pitch on this call. But the idea is we bring people together to pitch their real content, their businesses, their ideas. We do a 5-5-5 structure, like a 5-minute pitch, 5 minutes of question and answer, and 5 minutes of feedback from a coach and from each other. I love doing this. It's a fantastic opportunity. This will be going live again in Shanghai. And Colin, I know you've been pushing me to get this going online. So I know I definitely need to step up to the plate and get that going on Zoom. So thank you for your encouragement, mate. These are a few ways that I have worked with clients in the past. The reason I'm showing all of this to you at the moment, it's less of a hard sell and more just, you know, if you do work for a larger corporation and you know you guys have budget available, if you've enjoyed any of this at all, and you be willing to pay for a bit more, then by all means reach out, get in contact, refer me to your HR, refer me to your bosses, and I'd love to get in contact and have a chat, whatever that may look like. So yeah, at this point, I'm going to leave it there for me. My WeChat is on the left, my LinkedIn is on the right. I'm going to hand it over to Isabel to share maybe a little bit more about Teranga Valley and what those guys do so amazingly. And then as well, if you feel comfortable, please go ahead and utilize this group chat. Put your email address in there, put how people can contact you, a little bit of what you do, and we'll continue chatting after Isabel. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Really, we had a good time and it opened a lot of things. And I think I have a lot of training ahead to be able to be more engaging in the virtual scene. I thought also about two things. Maybe as well training the people who attend, because sometimes, as you see, maybe some people they just don't know that when they get in they should mute, or like simple basic things that can also make the event more smooth. So maybe we neglect this part, but it may be nice to work on that, make some trainings or maybe some videos beforehand available to know how to manage Zoom, even for us who are doing the events, to be more capable of muting people or jungling on all these options that we have to make the event more smooth. Also, I was thinking about the timetable, maybe when people come to know what to expect. And it's also maybe a way to engage, because we could, let them know that maybe something will happen at the end. So they are like, okay, I'll stay until the end. So having a clear timetable and let people looking forward for what's next and what's next. Maybe some final ideas out of everything you said today that came up to my mind. Yes, and I really hope we can have more engaging events, because at the moment I'm also locked in Senegal, in Dakar. So yes, I am planning to have a few more sessions online, and some of you, like Sabs, told me that that was great, because she is in China, but she's not living in Shanghai. So it's also nice for people to be able to join our events from time to time. We will still work on the offline, because all other members of Teranga Valley, Kizito, Mac, and Kitso are actually in Shanghai. So this will be running very soon, once we feel that everyone is ready to be back on offline events. So thank you very much, everyone. Feel free to share something if you want now, if you want to say something that you thought about this event, if you have some suggestions. Also, don't forget to PM me or any member of the team, Kizito, Mac, or Kitso. We are very happy to answer, and we are also happy to have your feedback to be able to set up the next events that will be in your interest. And thank you, Dan, very much for this presentation. I appreciate your time, volunteering, and coming to the Valley to offer us your knowledge. I highly appreciate also all the speakers of Teranga Valley of this month, like Kwame, like Maria, also my friend Colin, who has been also a speaker at the Valley, who joined, and of course all the people that I can see every week coming back and listening to those events. Thank you, guys, and feel free now. If someone wants to leave as well, feel free to leave. If someone wants to share something also, you have the floor now. Okay, no one, no one? Yeah, my pleasure, dear guys. Yes.
Sorry, maybe just a reminder for guys who would want to watch this again and recap that the meeting has been recorded, and we will share that video or a link to the video in the group in the coming days, a week at most. So if you're looking to recap, it'll be available. It was very insightful. Thank you, Dan. And Kwame, you're up next. Can't wait to see what you have to offer. Been looking forward to all the presentations.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. Let's end up this if you want, unless someone wants to say something. No? Okay, great. Dan, thank you so much. Let's see.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Let's see if we will make some progress from the next from the next event. Hopefully.
Yeah, Kwame, I'm looking forward to it, man. I really hope everyone can benefit from your expertise next time as well. I'm looking forward to that one.
Goodbye, guys. Have a nice end of
See you guys.
weekend.